Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Making Sense of It All. Today I have Yeliza Centeio. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jesse. Always a pleasure to be on here.
So I know we typically kind of talk about a topic or we've talked about different things within marketing, but I had asked you to join just really to talk about like what everything that's going on right now in our economy in the country and kind of its impact on the marketing industry and its impact on customers that you serve and customers that look like your customers. So I appreciate you making the time to do it and kind of doing this kind of off the cuff rather than doing anything planned.
Yeah, that's how you get the best, most authentic part of anything, any conversation.
I like to think so. So I know like when we last time we spoke was in January, so it's kind of like January is always kind of your everyone's looking forward, saying like they're very hopeful for the year and everything else, but then it's like you start to get into the year, and you start to see different, especially when you have a new administration come in. Like no matter what your politics are, there are real decisions that have been made that have a direct impact on the way people do business in this country. And one of the things that I don't think that people think about a lot is, you know, I don't want to call marketing an ancillary service, but it's like you're serving a business that is doing X, Y, and Z. And then you're coming in behind them or kind of like side like by their side and saying, here's how I'm going to help you as a business. Have you seen a shift, or have you had to make a shift here in the last several months because of things like tariffs and other policies that have happened?
1000%. Um, you know, when we met in January, we talked about how 2024 was just a tough year for so many businesses, but particularly tough for the marketing and advertising industry. All of my peers that I had spoken with, we were all in the same boat in terms of, the purse strings were being held a little bit closer. There was a lot of asks for plans, strategies, and ideas, but the execution really was falling through or just not being taken steps out to achieve them at all. People were just being more reserved because they were caution about what was going to happen with the new administration. Well, now we're here, new administration in place, and there are new fears and new asks coming out of clients. Everyone's being impacted in different ways. There are nonprofits that are being impacted by the new words and phrases. There's a list that did come out in early February of words that cannot be used in grant applications for federal funding. There's also federal funding that has been completely eliminated from a lot of industries and pillars that impact a lot of nonprofits. And so the needs of those types of clients have completely shifted. And I want to say that we're in a position now where we're not necessarily reevaluating or trying to change business operations, but there is a lot of pivoting happening right now across industries. Nonprofits, I think, are being impacted the most right now.
Right.
Second to them is consumer packaged goods because of the tariffs. I think that there are so many questions right now around tariffs and very little answers that clients in that particular industry are more just trying to understand how they're going to communicate internally to make sure that their staff doesn't abort mission and that they are able to keep up with demand and production, et cetera, and able to pivot on fees and things like that and how they structure from a business operations standpoint. But it's more the communication. What I secretly am loving about this is that it is what's going on in our economy right now, what's going on in our administration, in our state of the state, is actually making businesses stop for a moment and want to have strategic conversations. Whereas I
Yes.
think before we were in that rabbit race, right? That it was like, what is the lowest cost to get this achieved? What's your lowest marketing fee for this? What is your lowest media plan for this? And it was always a race to the bottom. Now people are taking a step back and saying, okay, Jaleesa, how can you and your team help us think better? How can we get ahead of this? How can we strategically position ourselves in this? How do we take what we always said before and flip the script in a way where we are not losing ourselves, our identity, and our core values, but adhering to this new administration so that we can continue to do the work? It's all about continuing to do the work. We may change the words, but the work is still being done. Whether you are in the consumer world or you're in a nonprofit world, you're still going to continue on your mission. What we're doing now is strategizing a little bit differently about how we communicate internally and externally.
Yeah, I always feel like with situations like this, and it doesn't have to be something like a tariff coming down. It could be when we had the mortgage crisis in '08. It could be, it's a number of different things throughout the years, but I always feel like there's a kind of two sides to the coin where if you can have the forethought, if you can see around the corner and see what's coming, there are a lot of people who win from things like this as well. It's not just something that people have to guard against or people have to protect against. It's where if you have the right mentality, or if kind of a positive mentality about it, no matter how you truly feel about it, but if you just from that business mentality look at things and say, okay, how can I win with this? I feel like there's a lot of people who come out, smelling like a rose when it comes to these situations.
1000%. And you know what I like about what you said is that only the strong survive. And that doesn't mean that you have to have the funds to be strong. That doesn't mean that you need to change everything that you're doing to be considered strong. It means that you have to be courageous enough. That's what makes you strong. Being courageous enough to still push through, even during uncertain times, even when you don't understand, even when you are afraid. If you just keep moving your business forward and continue to communicate effectively and efficiently, regardless of the swings, and just keep on going, you'll survive. But if you decide that you're going to hold back, not advertise, not market yourself, you're going to stop spending money, and you think you're going to make it, you're completely wrong. You have to continue to play the game as if there were no tariff conversations right now, as if there wasn't a new administration, as if there weren't a list of words that you can no longer use when applying for federal funding. You just have to keep on moving and you'll make it.
Sure. Well, and let's kind of talk about that because I know you've mentioned it a lot about the nonprofit sector. I think you're right. I think that they have probably been impacted more than anybody because I think that it's a really because there's a microscope on it. And one could look at it depending on your perspective. Sometimes people could look at it and say, okay, a few bad apples have kind of spoiled it for the bunch, like because there were some people that were taking advantage of federal funding. Now the microscope is on all nonprofits and what all nonprofits are doing. Would you say that that's correct?
Yes, I think that is correct. And I want to use an analogy here too. Like I came from a world where my entire family was being supported by the government. And I saw firsthand, because I lived in that environment, the people who did not need
Right.
assistance and were getting it. And I saw the people that needed the assistance and were barely getting what they needed, or were getting what they needed and they totally deserved it, right? So I experienced it. I was part of that world. And the same exact thing is happening to the nonprofit world right now. For so many decades, not even years, like we're talking decades here. There were the nonprofits that were in it for the wrong reasons and getting all the funding, right? And then there were the ones that were in it for the right reasons and deserved it, but weren't necessarily getting it. And so you're right. There is now this microscope that while it is punishing the bad apples, it is also punishing the good ones and making it even harder for those good ones to get what they need. And so what we're doing here is not saying, oh, I should fold over and play dead and see what happens. It's no, this is your time. This is your time to come through. This is your time to continue to do the good work. Just communicate a little bit differently to make sure that we are not being seen as some of those bad apples, or that we are not capitalizing on, what these bad apples for so many years capitalized on and got what they wanted. We still going to do the work. We just have to do
Sure.
it differently.
Well, and honestly, some of the best nonprofits that I see, like when I see like nonprofits that are long lasting, that serve the community for, not just for 5 years, 10 years, but for decades. A lot of the times they have diversification of funding. They've got ways that they generate revenue. They've got grants that potentially could be coming in. They've got individual donors and funders. They've got businesses funding them. And I feel like this is a tremendous opportunity for true development professionals in the nonprofit sector to look at their sources of funding and say, okay, if we've been heavily dependent on federal funding or on state funding, maybe it's time for us to look at that and actually say, let's look at where our funding is coming from. Let's have a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan on how to diversify our funding to where we're not, we're not blown up if the federal government all of a sudden says we're not sending you a check.
Correct. 1000%. I'm actually working right now on a project for they're a private school out of the Boston area. But because of the type of student body that they serve, they actually are a nonprofit, even though they have a tuition program. And so essentially, because they have tuition, there's a lot of federal funding they don't qualify for. They never did, they never have. And so we started having this conversation last year around how to get them more federal funding. All of a sudden, January comes, around mid-February, we all get that list. And, they looked at me like, oh my God, this whole plan we've been talking about for almost a year is not going to be able to happen. I said, hold on. It's not over. The game is not over. We still have a time. You never had to rely on federal funding anyway. So let's focus more on how do we get donations from non-federal agencies, from other administrations that don't necessarily have to adhere by federal rules, from local donors. There are so many people in Boston that we can tap into that we never tapped into. And so I actually am actively putting a matrix together, a communication matrix together for them on how do they talk to former clients, existing clients being parents, also the parents of the alumni, how do we talk to other high value donors in the Boston area without even having to talk to grants yet? And
Sure.
then, right? And then it's like, okay, now that we've tapped into that, now let's talk to some grants. Now let's talk to some institutions. And this is how we'll communicate to them. But that can't be your only strategy. You don't put all of your eggs in one basket.
No, but it's been very easy to for a while now, and I think it people just kind of relax into it. I don't want to say people are lazy because I know too many people, including my wife, that work for not in the nonprofit sector, and nobody in that sector is lazy per se, but you get used to getting kind of guaranteed funding. That's not really guaranteed, but it's just been coming for so many years. So I agree with you. I think there's tremendous opportunity that, or this can be looked at as a tremendous opportunity to where 5 years from now, the nonprofits in this country are standing on their own 2 feet in a lot of ways, rather than relying on just a single source of funding.
And so my opinion is everything that's happening right now is only going to make you stronger. And that's why I go back to the point I made earlier. Only the strong survive. And you only survive if you know how to pivot.
Sure. Well, and I think I think that's something that has been lost in this country in a lot of ways, is that businesses fail. Like it's not that is not something that is like, I would say 30, 40 years ago, people weren't surprised when a business failed. They might have been sad that their favorite place went out of business, or they might, and it happens all the time. I always think about the restaurant business, because restaurants go out of business all the time, and no one thinks twice about it. Well,
Mhm.
nobody thinks twice about it though. But when you have something like a nonprofit or something that has been in your city for a long time go out of business, and then people are like, "Oh my God, that can't happen." Yes, it can. It absolutely can. This is a free capitalist society. Like, something will rise up and take its place as well, that understands today's market and understands what needs to be done. So I feel like those things have just been looked at as almost like taboo, or they can't happen, but that's how our economy has ran for hundreds of years.
True statement. And, even the people who initially started X company that failed, even they will rise again with another idea.
Yes,
The concept. I mean,
100%.
I think I tried 5 or 6 different businesses before landing on Integral. And now Integral is going to be 5 years old in August. And I'm like, wow, this has been my longest lasting business. That doesn't mean I am a failure because I failed 5, 6 other times in having other business ventures. That's just how life works. Even Integral itself had to change its name 2 times in the last 5 years, not because of like business failures, but because of business administrative need. Like it is
100%.
what it is. It's part of how entrepreneurship works. You
It's
try
it's
something, it doesn't work, shut it down, start again. It's fine.
well, and it's the whole economy. It's not just entrepreneurs. I mean, you think about places like Kmart or Sears or these large industries that wouldn't change with the times. I mean, and I'm not putting Walmart in the same bucket, but Walmart was very, very slow to get onto online and delivery methods to their
Word.
customers. And so it's like, and they had an impact to their bottom line because of it. So when you see people that are not willing to shift with the times, that are not willing to read the tea leaves and see what needs to come next, they suffer for it. It just happens.
Exactly, exactly. And it goes to the point of, how we started this conversation before we even hit the record button. It's all about pivoting. You
100%.
need to be humble enough to pivot. It does not mean you lose your core identity or your business why, but you've got to pivot with the times in order to make it through. And you know what? Another 4 years, there's probably going to be another new administration with new rules, and it's going to shake things up for you again. And you just need to be able to pivot. So stay focused, stay driven, keep on doing the work.
No doubt, no doubt. So along those lines, outside of the nonprofits, but more focused on like, hard good industries or service industries, are you seeing any industries specifically that, anecdotally, I guess, but really that you're seeing a huge impact to, positive or negative? It doesn't all have to be negative here.
Yeah, I would say one that surprised me was the banking industry. I
Mhm.
work with a couple of smaller banks, the community banks, and they are trying to push their CDs very heavily now because that's been suffering. There are less and less people investing in CD accounts, long-term savings account. I have this one particular client that has even tried a Christmas savings account starting now. And that did really well for about a month. I think people were just intrigued by, oh, like we're talking about Christmas in March. That's interesting. And then it fizzled right away, which means that while people were intrigued by that idea, they are in a mindset right now where they cannot think about saving for the future, not even if the future is 8 months from now, because of fears of current state. And so there has been a lot of pause into long-term savings, and these banks are seeing that more people are putting into their personal savings account, but not into anything that's locked in.
Sure.
And that has been suffering because banks actually rely very heavily on you doing that. That is the money that they then utilize for growth.
I'm pretty familiar with that. And I think some,
Talking to somebody that knows that industry more than I do.
well, no, but it's interesting because I think some of it is also as you saw interest rates rise over the last several years, you saw people lock money away, you saw people, like actually save money, or they were going to treasuries. And I think that like even that drove a liquidity crisis for banks like about 18 months ago, because people were investing, a lot of institutions and a lot of larger clients were investing in treasuries rather than putting it into their money markets and in their savings and CDs. And so banks were concerned about liquidity at that point. So that's when you started seeing them raise their CD rates, raise their money market rates, and then money kind of flowed back into the financial institutions. And then I think what you're starting to see now is rates are starting to come down. And
Yeah.
then it's just like anything else. Like people get used to something. So it's like when instead of them coming back to renew that CD and they're saying, okay, what are you going to give me on it? And instead of hearing 5 point something, they're hearing maybe
Straight.
right 3 point something or maybe 4 point something. And so that doesn't.
I've seen in 6 months like 3.75, which isn't that enticing.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's the thing about it is like it's how it hits your ears. It's how it makes you've now set this expectation where people are like, I should hear five, and now I'm hearing three something, and it doesn't feel good. So people say, well, I'm gonna wait. And rather than in a honestly, it's just like anything else. If people don't do their homework, if people don't look into it and say, okay, that's what the market is bearing right now, they kind of almost pause and they sit on the sideline. The ironic part about it is they keep their money in their checking account or they do whatever it is, and then they're making next to nothing on it, rather than just going with whatever today is and
Exactly.
getting something from what they have to invest or to save.
Something is better than nothing. But yeah,
100%.
you're right. It is all psychological too.
Yes, 100%. I mean, it's all like I think all of this stuff really does tie back into the psychology of, do I see it as an opportunity? Do I see it as a loss? Do I see it as, oh no, something's happening to me? It's that it's that victim mentality, I think, that some people end up having when certain things happen that are outside of their control. If they see it as happening to them, if they treat it like they're a victim of X, Y, and Z, then they're going to react either negatively or just kind of statically to it. Whereas if you look at it and say, okay, where's the opportunity? How can I win? How can I be successful with what's happening right now? And if you have that mentality going into it, I think it helps so much more. I'll give you an example. I've had multiple customers or multiple people like talk about how these tariffs are going to impact them over the like since they were talked about in January. Some people looked at it and said, okay, I'll give you an example. I had someone who made pet vitamins, and it's like kind of a random industry, something I would have never really thought much about, but all of the stuff that they integrated into their pet vitamin final product was coming from outside of the United States. So they were incredibly concerned about the cost of their goods going up, basically 25%. Their margins weren't much more than 25%. So they're incredibly concerned about, okay, how am I going to run this business? So they start bringing in as much as they possibly can and now storing their raw materials to make their finished good. So, without follow up with it, it's like it ended up costing them significantly more. As far as their cost of goods sold, at least in the interim, went up substantially, but potentially over the long run, maybe it works out for them. Maybe as far as they're fine, but they looked at it and said, okay, how can I solve my own problem? I've also had people where they're in the import export business where they had large projects planned for 2025. And then when this happened, they're like, well, we're not doing anything. We're going to wait and see what happens. And it's like
That's suicide.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that we've been doing a lot of work on lately with our clients is all on messaging strategy and
Hmm.
theme. And it's taking, okay, what worked before that's not going to be working now? And how do we restructure our messaging? Again, utilizing the consumer state of mind now to our advantage and saying, this is how people are feeling. We've been doing polls, we've been surveying people, and we've also been doing our own market research so that we're not blinded by anecdotes and our own feelings. And we really do have a good pulse on how our customers feel. So then we can say, okay, here's how we properly communicate our value to them, not using fear-based methodology, but just going back to consumer psychology, easing the pain, making sure that the gains that they'll get with us actually are going to be valuable to them. And
Right.
keeping things aspirational. I think right now we're living in a society where there's too much fear of the unknown and
Hmm.
of these things that are happening, and people can't really understand them. And all they're being driven by is what they hear or the limited information that they have, right? And so I think it's our job as marketers to help our clients live through that through communication and effective messaging. It's not lying to them, it's not playing up on fears. It's just being aspirational and keeping people informed to the best of our abilities so that our product not just stay top of mind, but there is a heart warmth feeling to it when the market shifts, because everything
Right.
that goes down will come up and everything that goes up will come down. It is a fact of life.
Yes. No, I think you're 100% right. And it's the irony is, I think, is that it's and forgive me for this, but it's the marketing of a lot of news organizations or a lot of people that are counting on them keeping their eyeballs peeled to whatever it is that they're watching. And so they're doing a really good job of instilling fear in a lot of these people and keeping them like, okay, what's happening next? Rather than focusing on what's in front of you and being positive about your daily life, your running of your daily business and moving forward based on what's actually in reality and actually in front of you rather than what are you seeing on the television or what are you seeing on TikTok or whatever it is, whatever media that you're choosing to tune into, but their job is to keep you watching. That's
Right.
success to them. It's not delivering you truth or delivering you the best message for for your mental health and for your business's health. It's keep you watching, sell advertising.
Exactly, exactly. And there are some clients right now, the challenge that we're having is that they can't afford to advertise because obviously there's been an impact to their bottom lines. Therefore, they're unable to spend any type of dollars or as much as they were spending before on the actual advertising. That's fine. If we don't have the funds to advertise, it's okay, but there are still other ways that we can continue to market. Do not blend the two and dismiss them both simultaneously. While marketing and advertising go hand in hand, there are many ways that those lines are blurred between the two worlds. They're still separate in their own ways and how we think about them. You can certainly stop advertising if revenue is down, because obviously you can't advertise if you don't have any money coming in, but you can still market. And you
Sure.
can still market strategically and be really, really methodical about how you're doing that so that you don't lose yourself completely in this world.
No, I think that's a great point. And I know we've talked about that before, kind of the difference between advertising and marketing. And I think that it's very important for people to understand what that difference is. So I think your point is very well made. I think this is something that is very relevant. I think that like you as a marketing professional, you kind of have to wear two hats right now. You've got to be a professional, you've got to be a professional and an expert in marketing, but you also have to kind of be a part-time psychologist a little bit with people.
Yeah, 1000%. It's funny, the call that I was on earlier this morning, we were trying to come up with a word to describe this package that we're putting together. And I said, you know what? I don't know
Doc in
what
a
the word
box.
is now. Yeah. Like, I don't know what the word is right now, but I feel like in a way it's almost like a therapist, like you would see a therapist, but instead you
Right.
see a marketing person. And I was like, what do we call that? And you just hit it too.
Well, I just think it's any time where it's you've got like I said, you got a lot of people that feel like the sky is falling on some stuff and they really got to be pulled back from the edge and they've got to reframe their own mentality and their own thinking about it. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
mm,
Like I unfortunately had a call yesterday with a client, and he was like, "Hey, right now I'm about 6 grand in the hole. I want to work with you, but I just don't know how, given the situation that I'm in." And I'm like, "Hey, listen, we can find creative ways to still be engaged, and I can still help you strategically without it costing you, a retainer of having a full marketing team doing everything. There's still a lot that we can support you with during this time so that you have that sounding board, you have that strategic guidance, you have someone telling you what to do, what not to do. And along the way, you're still learning, still growing. There's so many ways that we can, if we stay curious, there are so many ways that we can help each other.
100%. Well, and I think it always helps to have that second set of eyes, that other, a perspective that's outside of yours, that's being objective about your business and objective about what's going on. So along those lines, and kind of to wrap us up, if people hear this, they would like that. They are kind of, they're like, you know what, that's me, or that's my business. I need that. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you? What's the best way for people to start a conversation?
Email me, and that's Centeio at integral-mktgadv.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we put a link at the bottom of this video for anybody who's interested in getting a hold of you. Jaliza, I'm really grateful that you decided to take the time and have a conversation with us today. I think the information and just the conversation is incredibly valuable for people to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. Love these opportunities. Thank you. You're so good.
No doubt. We'll catch you down the road.